Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Quiller, and welcome to the Air Force Culture and Language Center's Facebook Live event for March. Now, here's a little trivia for you. Did you know that Alpha Mu Gamma, the National Collegiate Foreign Language Honor Society, started a national celebration of foreign languages way back in 1957? On December the 12th, 1956, President Dwight D. Eisenhower sent a telegram endorsing the celebration, and even succeeding presidents have added, each succeeding president has added his support. National Foreign Language Week was inaugurated in the spring of 1957, and we want to join that celebration as well. Joining us today to help us celebrate the study of foreign languages is First Lieutenant Emmanuel Parashev and Master Sergeant Julio Alvarado. Lieutenant Parashev is a chemist currently working at the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, directing cutting-edge research in biotechnology in private industry and academia to address Air Force operational needs. He is a dual LEAP scholar in Japanese and French and has participated in LEAP Lights and eMentors. Lieutenant Parashev was nominated by the Air Force Materiel Command for the Language Capable Airman of the Year Award for his use of French and Spanish to advance AFRL science and technology mission goals. Master Sergeant Alvarado is the senior enlisted leader of the Defense Coalition Management Enterprise Innovation and Transformation Division Joint Staff. He's stationed at the Defense Intelligence Agency Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, Washington, D.C. He provides guidance and advice to senior J2613 leaders and how to meet current and future training goals to improve the overall effectiveness of the Defense Collection Management Enterprise. Master Sergeant Alvarado enlisted in the Air Force on April of 2011. He completed the Operations Intelligence Apprentice course in Goodfellow Air Force Base, Texas, on February of 2012. Following technical training, Master Sergeant Alvarado supported the 18th Wing's intelligence requirements as an all-source intelligence analyst at Kadena Air Force Base in Japan. Prior to his current position, he was assigned to the 480th Fighter Squadron, Spangdahlem Air Force Base in Germany. Master Sergeant Alvarado, in his intelligence career, has deployed to Southwest Asia and Turkey to support operational intelligence requirements during Operational Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today in the Air Force's Global Classroom.
Thank you, it's an honor.
It's my pleasure, thank you.
So let's start with how many languages you both speak. Master Sergeant Alvarado, let's start with you first, and then Lieutenant Parashev.
So in terms of speaking, I think Lieutenant Parashev said it really well earlier when we were doing the comp check. I can speak well 3 languages, Spanish, English, French. However, every time I go deploy or every time I'm in some foreign country for longer than 1 month, I push myself to learn the languages, right? And before the Air Force, I did learn Czech, which got me a 1-1 in my scores. So I can hold a decent conversation with a Czech person. I can navigate the streets of Prague. And then I do have also Turkish and a little bit of Korean. So I would say 3 good and then 3 that need some development, but I could definitely hold my weight.
You can hold your own.
Yes.
Lieutenant, what about you?
Yeah, I think he explained it very well. And I'll just echo that sentiment. It really depends on what degree of fluency you're talking about. I say I have at least some basic conversational level in 7 languages: French, Spanish, German, Italian, Japanese, Bulgarian, and of course English. And I would say French and Spanish are the foreign languages I know best.
Well, one of the things that Mr. Ward, our director, likes to say is that you should add military to that as well. So you have 1 more you should add to that.
That's accurate, absolutely.
Exactly. So how difficult is it to learn a foreign language, another language? And either one of you can go
Yep.
at this time. Either one who wants to take that question.
You know, I'd say that's kind of a loaded question. It depends on so many factors, you know, personal motivation, time, aptitude for language learning, etc. You know, I'd say the most important factor is probably what language you are learning and what your mother tongue is. So for English speakers, you know, of the major languages, I guess Dutch is probably would be considered one of the easiest languages to learn. If your native language is Spanish, for example, one of the Latin-based languages like Portuguese or French is probably going to be easier than English. But you know, I'd found that, you know, for me personally, no matter how difficult any language is based off of your mother tongue, the most helpful thing you can do to improve is just to practice at least a little bit every day to keep up that momentum.
Yeah, I agree with Lieutenant Parashef. And my first experience, and I'm just going to bring it back to experience. So I still remember as a 12-year-old trying to learn English, right? So I grew up in Spanish and in Puerto Rico where they speak Spanish mostly. And I remember taking English classes and trying to improve my English and my motivation. And I think motivation is a big thing, as you mentioned, Lieutenant Parashef, motivation and interest. My biggest motivation to learn English is because I had a set of cousins that I really enjoyed spending time with, but they only spoke English when they came to visit Puerto Rico. So that really pushed me to, hey, I want to spend time with them. I want to have a conversation with them. I'm going to push myself. And it's about interest and about putting yourself through that transformational change, right? And then as I started learning French in college, getting into it and like you said, Lieutenant Parashef, the practice and getting into the dialogues and repetition and consistency. I think that's the biggest thing, consistency, and then keeping the interest, keeping that flame alive to continue to learn. And that's what gets most people. I think a lot of people have the potential to learn 7, 8, 9 languages, honestly. But it's just that flame gets turned off at some point. Maybe they made a mistake in some class and they feel now shy to try again, right? And I met a lot of people in my travels where they want to speak Spanish with me, and after you open that door, they feel like it's okay to start again. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Well, motivation is obviously a big part of that. In the civilian world, it may be that you're traveling to that country, or you just want to learn because you have friends who speak that language. So learning another language for fun might be one thing, but doing it for military utilization is quite another thing. How do you stay sharp in your language skills?
Yeah, I would say, you know, the Air Force and DoD provide fantastic resources to stay sharp on language skills. The Language Enabled Airman Program has by far been the most helpful program for me to improve on my language skills. All the resources offered, e-mentors, lights. It's a really valuable program. Using language learning apps like Mango Languages or Duolingo is another great way to keep up with languages. And by the way, there's a completely free subscription to Mango Languages for all military personnel through the DoD MWR library. So if you didn't know that, just go check it out and you can have a free subscription to Mango Languages.
Yeah, it's like Lieutenant and I talked to each other before talking here. No, we follow similar trends to stay sharp. One thing I do to stay sharp, honestly, is language is a living thing, right? And I look at books that are old and I'm like, is this really how they're speaking French in Paris right now? Maybe not, right? So I try to look at TV series. I like to look at movies that maybe are not the more formal French, for example, but they are actually using slang or using different expressions that are very cultural, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I need to research this, or maybe I need to maybe dive a little bit deeper on this aspect, right? And in terms of the military side for utilization, the way I stay sharp, I like to read foreign press as well. I think that's very key. I'm going through my master's degree right now, and had the fortune to speak French, and I was actually using that for my paper. I was translating some really specific stuff on French interest in China. So I was translating that from French and then bringing that back, and I learned a ton of different terms that I didn't know. So I think, again, it comes down to finding something that really interests you and then using the tools that circle that to go for it.
Well, what you just said, sir, leads me into another question about any useful tips. And I had heard that using either newspapers or music and cultural aspects from the other country, from the target language that you're trying to speak, is a great way to immerse yourself into that language. Maybe not for utilization, but for conversation. Any other tips that you guys have that you might like to pass along to someone who's trying to learn a language?
You know, I think, yeah, just what you brought up just now is a good thing to highlight. For a lot of reasons, I think looking at, local media in whatever language you're studying, like whether that's especially current, like books or even just news, it's a good way to get a perspective that isn't always shown, or maybe is reflected in somewhat more of a limited capacity on, our own news networks and things like that. So yeah, I would say, read the news in that language, log into local news networks and see how they're portraying the news there. And if, especially what Master Sergeant Alvarado was saying about slang, like for me, I know that's always, and probably for many others, one of the hardest things to pick up on, because you learn the formal register, and then every language, English that's included, of course, like there's a completely different informal register that is not as easy to learn just from textbooks and things like that. So yeah, it's all good advice.
I want to add to that, and thank you, Lieutenant Parashef. That was really insightful. I want to add to that, and just to add a little bit of my experience. When I lived in Czech Republic around 2009, time has gone by, but I haven't really changed my habits in learning new language. And the way that I learned Czech there, honestly, commercials are a great tool. They're very unorthodox. People don't really think about commercials, but I used to sit in front of the TV in Czech Republic because I didn't really live in Prague. I live in a place called Olomouc, which has not a lot of English speakers. It's a very small city within the Czech Republic or Czechia now. And there I remember seeing a milk commercial that said "Cesta ke zdraví," is the way to be healthy, and I used to repeat that to my students, and then they were like, "Oh, wow, great!" And I used to incorporate that sentence into other things that I was learning. So the thing is that commercials, they're very quick. They're usually like 30 seconds, maybe a minute at most. They try to send a lot of messages at once. They have a lot of play on words that require a higher level of understanding in the language. So I think a lot of that together in a very bite-sized format is key. And I think that helps. I mean, I know that maybe you're not going to be sitting down watching commercials all the time, but it's a good tool to incorporate into a robust language training environment.
And of course, I'm going to put a plug in for our own training with the eMentor programs that we have, and of course, LIGHTS, the language intensive training programs. The eMentor courses where you speak with a native speaker and they follow you 24/7 wherever you are because they're online. Those are exceptional as well. I'm sure you guys have taken those courses too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I want to share that in Colombia. I also want to make this as a plug to the AFCLC, how well they do their program. I had the fortune to study 2 weeks with the top university professors of Bogota that was coordinated by the center. And I think that really expanded my level of Spanish beyond what I already had. So, I mean, the program itself and the resources that you pour into us are outstanding.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I have nothing but good things to say as well about the LEAP opportunities to improve on languages such as the mentors and the lights. Yeah, I know like my own language ability has improved for both Japanese and French during compared to before I took the mentor class. So yeah, tremendous improvement. Yeah, so thank you for offering that.
So I think now's the perfect time to see if we have any questions from our audience. We have folks on that are following us on Facebook, and we have some faculty and staff who are with us here today on Zoom as well. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to drop them in the chat or unmute your mic and join us. We have a couple of questions here in the chat. What benefits have you experienced as military members having language proficiency in multiple languages?
I would like to take this question.
Sure.
I've been 12 years in as an intelligence professional, and honestly, at least speaking good French and good Spanish has boosted my level of analysis. I'm able to read foreign press and other documents online that enhance my analysis. So I think that's a very tactical way of seeing it, but also in the strategic side or more on the building alliances. I just came back from Spain from an amazing opportunity that the LEAP program gave me to go teach English to the Spanish Infantry Academy in Toledo, Spain, and seeing how they look up to the U.S. military in terms of doctrine, and then connecting in a very strategic partner level, that would not be possible without language. I think without learning that foreign language, without having that proficiency, those partnerships are not really cemented in a deeper level. So I think that is the key. Speaking the language of the partner is the biggest thing that we could do as a military.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I think a few examples from my career. There was a briefing relatively recently, actually, in which my Japanese training came in handy. So it was a briefing on some Chinese tech, and because Japanese kanji and Chinese hanji sometimes use the same character, I was able to actually decipher what that graph, what a graph in one of the PowerPoints was referring to, and it was, I was able to help explain that to the group, and that graph is kind of important to give context to what the rest of the briefing was describing. So it was sort of unexpected, but it's just one small example of how this training came in handy in a practical context. Another instance was I think similar to what Master Sergeant Alvarado was describing, it kind of helped broaden my perspective on the work I'm currently doing. So as a chemist, I'm able to look at foreign language science articles in both Spanish and French, in articles that aren't necessarily published or sometimes published first in those languages and then later translated into English. So it kind of lets me have access to those sooner, and then in turn inform any discussions I have with my team, on the research we're doing at the Air Force Research Laboratory. So yeah, it's in every instance, knowing foreign language has been really helpful for my current career field.
We have one other question here. It's a two-parter, and you've already answered one part. How do you juggle learning more than one language at a time? This is perfect for you guys. You have like 6 and 7 apiece here.
Yeah.
For me, oh, go ahead, sir.
No, you go ahead. I'll take it after you.
For me, it's not much the juggling. If you make it part of your life, I don't think you need to juggle anything. And that's how I do it, right? So I try to keep up with my French, like the lieutenant said, via small exercises in the applications or reading some foreign news. But I also recently took a second part-time job doing interpretation for hospitals as a Spanish speaker, right? So I try to incorporate that. I do it more for helping the people in the community, but also you get that extra money that you can use to then travel to another foreign country, right? So I mean, I keep it as part of my lifestyle. My wife's Korean, so I try to speak to her in Korean every day, at least a phrase or two, to connect to her with her in a deeper level. So I think making it part of a daily routine or daily lifestyle is key, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And that I think was the main point that that I was going to give as well. Like just back to that consistency. Even if it's just a little bit, like I'm talking even a minute or two on one of those apps, Duolingo or Mango Languages, it helps you not to lose motivation. I think like skipping even a day, at least I found, you're like 10 times more likely to skip the following day than if you had just done even one small lesson. And that doesn't mean that, you should always only do a minute a day. It's good to, when you have the time, which can be very difficult, especially in the military context, we're always busy. But, I think just that consistency helps keep that motivation going. And so, if we're talking on a day that you're really busy, if you're studying 5 languages, that's just 5 minutes, right? So I think you can find time at some point in the day to do that. And then I would say an additional thing is never pass up the opportunity to talk with a native speaker if it presents itself to you. For example, like on a personal side, like if we have guests visiting our church, like and they don't speak English, if they only speak Spanish, I'll try to converse with them. It helps to sort of be cordial, but as well, it's good to have that extra practice. So that's just one example, but you can apply that in many different situations.
So we have a question here someone who's asking, do you have a favorite language to speak in?
Wow. I think I choose different languages for different situations, I would say. I think I like poetry in French most. I think it's very it's just another level. But I feel like music for me, Spanish carries like this magic to it. As much as Portuguese as well, I would say those 2 languages for me musically are just beautiful to listen to. But I mean, I've learned many languages, but I mean, of course, 100% biased. I always come back to Spanish. That's the tongue that gave me the ability to speak and communicate. So that for me is just beautiful.
Lieutenant, what about you? Do you have a favorite language to speak?
I would say whatever I'm studying at that time is my favorite language for that moment.
Now that's an easy way out, sir.
Kind of a diplomatic answer, you could say, but
very. But
yeah,
we'll take it.
I would say, yeah, okay. I could leave it there. I'd say I kind of go in, in phases. I'll go through like a phase where I'm really hyped about studying French, especially if I'm doing something like an e-mentor or a light in that language, and then kind of by necessity the other languages will take a backseat. That doesn't mean that I'm less interested in studying those languages. It's just like, this is a great time to do it, so I'm just going to go all in, that kind of thing. But every language has its own beauty. I think so much of a country and a nation's culture and history are interwoven in their language, that it just helps you appreciate that culture more when you're speaking that language. So it's hard to say. I wouldn't say I have a favorite language. It just kind of varies depending on what season we're in, I guess.
Well,
I want to thank you because of that comment really sparked a thought in me where, I spent most of my career overseas. So I met a lot of foreign partners. I listened to their perspectives. I listened to their languages and how they express themselves. And as humans, we tend to express ourselves about the same things, about the same problems in different ways. But that adds to such a holistic perspective that you don't get from just staying within your own area. And you know, we all have very unique perspectives, and every language is unique in how they express themselves. So that's exactly how you said, right? So.
And we have one last visitor question here. As you've grown in your language skills and your culture knowledge, has there been anything while you were navigating foreign languages in context that caught you by surprise and prompted an aha moment?
Wow, that happens to me a lot with Spanish even. Like I'm a native speaker, but it doesn't mean that I know every word in the vocabulary, or there's regional Spanishes, as Lieutenant Parship might know, from Latin America, that I just don't know because I don't live in the country. I don't really, you know, understand fully their culture. So I had an aha moment. Well, first of all, I was thrown into the fire, not to throw any spears at least, but I was thrown into the fire without any simultaneous interpretation training. But I learned, I did it. And I had to translate for 10 Latin American Air Force chiefs, and one of them was from Peru. And his vocabulary and accent just was like, wow, I don't understand. So I was like, what do I do now, right? I was able to finally grasp it and get it, but it was a moment where I was like, okay, yeah, there's different levels of Spanish, there's different vocabularies. Just because you're fluent in one aspect of it doesn't make you an expert in all of it, you know, and being humble and realizing this, it's also a key to learning, I would say.
Yeah, and you know, I had said before that learning a language really gives you insight into that country's you know, history and culture. I would say the reverse can also be true, right? Learning a country's history and culture can help you speak their language better. And I think like one language that's particularly well characterized in is Japanese in my experience. I would say they have almost two separate languages with almost different grammars. One is the kind of somewhat informal or day-to-day speech, and the other is called keigo, which is like a formal register. And that's something that you would speak to, you know, if you're a diplomat or something, and you know, you're going to meet an ambassador, then you would speak to them in keigo, which has its own rules, its own grammar. It's almost like a separate second sub-language of Japanese. And I mean, we don't really even have something like that in English, I would say, and it's kind of a foreign concept. But I think if you understand the way the Japanese culture works, then it makes a lot more sense why they have such different structures for formal and informal speech. I mean, for us, we say like sir or ma'am, you know, and we might, you know, use less slang or something. But yeah, it's completely different words, and it's almost a different grammar to when you're speaking in Japanese formally versus informally. So that's something that you can't really understand unless you understand the Japanese culture. So it goes both ways.
Well, it's really good to know that you guys are lifelong learners, because I think that's what you need to keep your language skills up and your culture skills. That and curiosity.
Yeah.
So I want to give you guys the opportunity, if you would like to if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to add before we sign off.
Yeah, you know, thank you so much for inviting us on this call. It's really a pleasure to have the chance to, you know, give advice or to speak on this subject. It's something I'm passionate about, and I have been for my whole life, really. So yeah, thank you. And you know, I'd say if you're not in LEAP now, you don't have to wait necessarily to apply your language skills to the mission. You know, I'd say focus on the mission first, and then see how your language skills can tie in with that. I think you'd be surprised if you can kind of think outside the box and look at how you know, your asset, even if you're not in LEAP, your language asset can inform and promote the mission, and I think that in and of itself is valuable.
I want to echo that, Lieutenant Parashef, very insightful and very a great response to you know, closing what we just did, which is inspire others and I get inspired by just, listening to those people that are trying to learn another language. And what I want to say to those that are learning right now is, don't give up. Even if you think that learning all these words or learning all that language might be difficult at the time, I have very gratifying experiences where only I spoke a few words, but I made a huge difference in somebody's life. Like, for example, I saw a lady that was lost in the airport, and I was able to get her where she needed to be in French. And I only spoke like maybe 2 sentences, but those 2 sentences maybe helped her get to where she needed to be, and just, give her that peace of mind. And learning a language is something that connects us as a human race and the world. So I think it's one of those skills that everybody should at least try once. So, and again, thank you again for the opportunity. I'm really passionate about this as well. And I think, LEAP is one of the biggest and most amazing projects that the military has ever created for the force. So I think keep up the good work. I know that it's not in vain. This is a great project that just keeps the force united and partnership strong. So thank you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both so much. It has been our pleasure to host you today. And special thanks to my outreach partner, Ms. Michaela McCurry, to the AFCLC faculty and staff who've joined us today, and especially to those of you who've joined us for this very special episode of the Air Force's Global Classroom on Facebook Live. And remember, we are AFCLC.